The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any species. Its walls stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed near the ceiling. 17 different species sat in their places, each one believing they were the most important voice in the galaxy. Ambassador Park Ga stood at the human platform. It was the smallest platform in the room. It was also the furthest from the center, placed near the back like an afterthought. She had stood there for 10 years, speaking for all of humanity. Before her, other ambassadors had stood in the same spot for 300 years. 300 years of asking. 300 years of waiting. 300 years of being told not yet and maybe later, and prove yourselves worthy. Today was supposed to be different. Today, the council would vote on whether humanity could become a full member. Full members could vote on laws. Full members could travel freely. Full members were treated as equals. Park Ga had spent months preparing for this day. She had gathered evidence of every contribution humanity had made. The medical cures they had shared freely. The technology they had given without asking for payment. The wars they had helped end. The disasters they had helped survive. She believed, truly believed, that this time would be different. High Counselor Vetherin rose from his seat at the center of the chamber. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 black eyes that never seemed to blink. His species, the Dominion, had ruled the council for 1,000 years. When he spoke, everyone listened. "We have heard the petition of the human species," Vetherin said. His voice echoed through the chamber. "We have reviewed their history, their contributions, and their potential. Now we shall vote." Park Ga held her breath. Around her, representatives from 17 species pressed their voting buttons. The results appeared on a massive screen above the central platform. 15 against, 2 in favor. The numbers burned into her eyes. 15 species had looked at 300 years of human effort and said no. Only 2 had supported them, and they were the smallest, weakest members of the council. Vetherin did not seem surprised. He did not seem sorry. He simply nodded as if the result was expected. "The petition is denied," he announced. "The human species remains classified as provisional. They may continue to operate under current restrictions. Perhaps in another century, when they have matured, we may reconsider." When they have matured? The words hit Park Ga like a slap. Humanity had existed for 200,000 years. They had reached the stars. They had cured diseases that other species still suffered from. They had created art and music and literature that aliens traveled across the galaxy to experience. But to the council, humans were still children. Still too young. Still too emotional. Still too dangerous to trust. Park Ga looked around the chamber. She saw the faces of beings who had eaten human food, used human medicine, flown on human ships. She saw species whose planets had been saved by human volunteers, whose children had been educated by human teachers, whose wars had been ended by human diplomats. None of them would meet her eyes. Something changed inside Park Ga at that moment. Something that had bent for 300 years finally broke. Not with anger, not with tears. It simply snapped quietly, like a thread cut by scissors. She gathered her documents. She straightened her uniform. She bowed once, a deep formal bow that her grandmother had taught her when she was a little girl. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. "Ambassador," his voice cut through the murmur of the chamber. "You have not been dismissed." Park Ga stopped. She turned slowly to face the High Counselor. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then she smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was not an angry smile. It was the smile of someone who had finally understood something important. "We dismiss ourselves," she said. Her voice was soft, but somehow it reached every corner of the massive chamber. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Compact. All treaties are ended. All agreements are canceled. All exchanges are stopped. The chamber exploded with noise. Representatives shouted questions. Advisors demanded explanations. Vestrin's 4 eyes went wide with something that might have been surprise, or might have been fear. But Park Ga did not stay to answer. She walked through the great doors and let them close behind her. Her footsteps echoed in the empty corridor as she made her way to the transport bay. Her assistant, a young man named Lee Doyon, was waiting for her. His face was pale. He had watched the vote on a screen outside the chamber. "Ambassador," he said, "what do we do now?" Park Jie looked at him with tired eyes. "We go home, Doyon." "We all go home." She sent a single message to every human in council space. It contained only 3 words: return immediately. Silence. Within 6 hours, the impossible happened. Every human vanished. Ships that had been docked for years suddenly departed. Stations that humans had built and maintained went dark. Scientists abandoned laboratories. Doctors left hospitals. Teachers closed their schools. They took nothing that was not theirs. They destroyed nothing. They left no messages, no explanations, no forwarding addresses. They simply stopped being part of the galactic community. The council sent urgent messages demanding answers. The messages went unanswered. They sent ships to track the human vessels. The ships found nothing but empty space where humans used to be. They searched records for the location of Earth, humanity's homeworld. The coordinates led to a quiet yellow star, with nothing but asteroids orbiting it. Humanity had not just left, they had erased themselves from the galaxy's awareness. On the council floor, Vetherin stood in the sudden silence. For the first time in his long life, he felt something cold settle in his stomach. He did not know what it was. His species had no word for it, but humans did. They called it regret. And in the days and weeks and months that followed, as system after system began to fail, as carefully maintained balances began to collapse, as threats that had been held at bay began to stir, the entire Galactic Council would learn exactly what that word meant. Humanity had not slammed the door. They had not shouted or threatened or fought. They had simply walked away in silence. And that silence, Council would discover, was the loudest sound the galaxy had ever heard. 3 months passed after the humans disappeared. At first, the Council treated it as a minor problem. Humans were useful, yes, but surely not necessary. The galaxy had existed long before humanity arrived. It would continue without them. They were wrong. The first crisis came from a mining world called Desert 7. The planet had a poisonous atmosphere that would kill most species within minutes. But 15 years ago, a human engineer named Director Bei Yuna had built filtration systems that made the air breathable. Under her guidance, this Sur-7 had become one of the richest mining operations in the galaxy. When the humans left, they did not take the filtration machines. They did not destroy them. They simply locked every system behind codes that no one else could break. The Thesari. Governor sent desperate messages to the council. "The filters are failing," he reported. "We have tried everything. Our best engineers have worked day and night. But the human systems are too complex. We cannot understand how they work. We never bothered to learn." Within weeks, the mines were abandoned. Thousands of workers fled the planet as the poisonous air crept back into the tunnels. An industry worth billions of credits collapsed because one human woman had taken her knowledge with her. Similar reports arrived. From every corner of the galaxy, the Corvalli hegemony controlled a vast agricultural empire. Their farms fed dozens of worlds. But their soil had been dead for centuries, poisoned by ancient wars. The only reason anything grew was a special compound that human scientists had created. Without regular shipments of that compound, the soil returned to its natural state. Crops withered. Harvests failed. Famine spread across Corvalli space. The Yendari Collective prided themselves on their communication networks. They had connected the galaxy, allowing instant communication across impossible distances. But their translation systems had been designed by a human linguist named Dr. O. Taiwu. He had spent 40 years perfecting the technology, making constant small adjustments to keep up with changing languages and dialects. Without him, the systems began to drift. Words that meant peace started translating as surrender. Phrases of greeting came out as insults. A simple trade negotiation between two friendly species ended in violence because neither side understood what the other was saying. High Counselor Vetherin watched the reports pile up on his desk. Each day brought new disasters. Each week revealed another system that had depended on human expertise. The galaxy, he realized with growing horror, had not merely used human help. It had become completely dependent on it. But the worst news came from the outer reaches. The Scourge had been the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced. They were a species of living machines, billions of individual units connected by a single mind. They did not negotiate. They did not trade. They simply consumed, breaking down planets and species alike into raw materials for more Scourge 200 years ago. The Scourge had nearly destroyed everything. Only a massive defense grid had stopped them, a network of weapons and shields stretching across thousands of light years. The grid had held them back ever since, keeping them trapped in the empty space between galaxies. That grid had been designed by human engineers, built by human workers, maintained by human technicians. Now those humans were gone, and the grid was dying. Power reserves are at 30%, Admiral Torvin of the Council Fleet reported. We have tried to repair the generators, but we do not understand the technology. Human engineering is different from ours. They think in ways we cannot follow. Vetheron stared at the tactical display. Red lights blinked across the outer reaches, each one representing a section of the grid that had failed. Through those gaps, Scourge scout ships had already begun to probe the galaxy's defenses. How long? He asked. 6 months? Perhaps a year? Then the grid fails completely, and the Scourge will come. The council chamber that had been so confident 3 months ago now echoed with fear. Representatives who had voted against humanity screamed at each other, blaming everyone except themselves. Some demanded that the humans be found and forced to help. Others suggested surrender to the Scourge. A few simply wept. Vetherin silenced them all with a single word. Find them, he ordered. Send every ship we have. Search every system. Offer them whatever they want. Full membership. Leadership positions. Anything. The search began immediately. Hundreds of ships launched toward human space. Carrying diplomats and gifts and desperate promises, they found nothing. Human territory was not hidden or protected. The borders were open. The systems were mapped. Any ship could travel freely through space that humans had once called home. But the humans themselves were simply not there. Their cities stood empty, clean and organized, as if the residents had stepped out for a moment and never returned. Their farms lay fallow, but not destroyed. Their factories sat silent, waiting for workers who would never come. A scout ship found a single message, carved into a monument on what had once been a human colony world. The words were simple. We gave you everything. You wanted nothing. So we left you nothing. Good luck. The search parties returned empty-handed. The diplomats had no one to negotiate with. The gifts sat unopened in cargo holds. Humanity had not hidden from the galaxy. They had simply found somewhere else to be. Somewhere the Council's instruments could not detect. Somewhere their maps did not show. And as the weeks passed and the Scourge grew bolder, as the grid failed, piece by piece, and the darkness crept closer, the Council finally understood the truth. They had not rejected a primitive species, seeking acceptance. They had rejected the only people who knew how to save them, and now those people were gone. Admiral Kong. Sujin stood on the bridge of her ship, the Eternal Patience. It was the largest vessel in the United Human Fleet, but today it felt small. Today, the weight of an entire species rested on her shoulders. The tactical display in front of her showed the galaxy in real time. Red marks spread across the map like a disease. Each mark was a Scourge attack. Each attack meant dead worlds, consumed populations, entire species erased from existence. Admiral Harade said quietly, "The Scourge broke through the Corvalli defense line 6 hours ago. 3 colony worlds have gone dark. Estimated casualties are in the billions." Sujin closed her eyes. She had trained Corvalli officers once, back when humanity still believed in cooperation. She had shared meals with their families, played with their children, taught them human songs? Now, those officers were probably dead, and the children were worse than dead. And the council's response? She asked. They are requesting humanitarian assistance. Actually, Ambassador, they are begging for it. High Counselor Vetheran himself has asked to speak with you directly. Sujin turned from the display. Through the viewport, she could see the human fleet spread across the darkness of space. Thousands of ships, each one built in secret over the past century. The Council had never known about them. They had never bothered to ask what humans did with their spare time. Put him through, she said. The holographic image of Vetheran appeared on the bridge. He looked different than she remembered. Smaller somehow, like a balloon slowly losing air. His four eyes, once so cold and certain, now carried a desperation she had never seen before. Admiral Kong, he began. His voice was rough, tired. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally request military assistance against the Scourge threat. We are prepared to offer no. The word hung in the air between them. Simple. Final. Complete. Vetheran blinked all four eyes at once. I am sorry, I do not understand. The word is no, Counselor. Humans use it when they refuse something. I am refusing your request. Admiral, please. You must understand the situation. Billions have already died. Billions more will follow. The Scourge does not negotiate. They do not stop. Without your help, the entire galaxy will fall. Sujin walked slowly across the bridge, her boots clicking against the metal floor. She stopped directly in front of the hologram, close enough that she could see every line of fear on Vetheran's face. Let me tell you a story, Counselor. 300 years ago, a small group of humans arrived in this galaxy. They were curious. They were hopeful. They wanted to learn and share and belong. Do you know what they found? Vetheran said nothing. They found a galaxy that treated them like insects. They were given the worst territories, the most dangerous jobs, the smallest voice in every decision. When they complained, they were told to be patient. When they proved themselves, they were told it was not enough. When they asked for basic respect, they were laughed at. She paused, letting the silence stretch. But still they helped. They cured your diseases. They fed your hungry. They protected your borders. They gave everything they had, asking only to be treated as equals. And what did they receive in return? Admiral, 15 votes against? 15 species looked at 3 centuries of sacrifice and said humans were not worthy of respect, not worthy of equality, not worthy of basic dignity. Sujin's voice remained calm, almost gentle. That made it worse somehow. We learned something that day, Counselor. We learned that the galaxy did not want humanity as partners. The galaxy wanted humanity as servants, as tools to be used and discarded, as lesser beings who should be grateful for any scrap of attention. Behind her, the crew of the Eternal Patience listened in silence. Many of them had served in council space. Many of them had experienced the casual contempt that aliens showed to humans, the small insults, the denied promotions, the assumption that human opinions did not matter. So we left, Sujin continued. We took nothing that was not ours. We broke no laws. We simply stopped participating in a system that despised us. And now that system is collapsing, and you want us to save it. Vetheran's hologram flickered. His hands trembled visibly. What do you want? Name your price. Full membership? Control of the council itself. We will give you anything you still do not understand. Sujin shook her head slowly. We do not want your council. We do not want your territories. We do not want anything you have to offer. Because we learned, Counselor, that anything given by the galaxy can be taken away. Anything earned from the council can be denied. Then what? What must we do? Sujin turned away from the hologram. Through the viewport, she watched a distant star flicker and die as the Scourge consumed another system. You must learn what we learned. You must feel what we felt. You must understand, truly understand, the cost of contempt. No. She gestured to her communications officer. The connection began to close. Admiral, wait. Please. Billions of innocents will die. Sujin paused. For just a moment, something painful crossed her face. She was not a cruel woman. She had spent her life protecting people, not watching them suffer. Every death in this war hurt her in ways she would never admit. Yes, she said softly, they will. And that tragedy belongs to the council that created it. We did not start this war, counselor. We will not end it on your schedule. You are condemning us to death. No. I am allowing you to experience consequences. Something the council has avoided for far too long. The hologram vanished. Vesterina's desperate voice cut off mid-plea. The bridge of the eternal patience fell silent. Lieutenant Park Min-jae, a young officer standing nearby, cleared his throat nervously. Admiral, with respect, are we really going to let them fall? All those people? Sujin stood at the viewport for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was heavy with sorrow. No, Lieutenant. We are not going to let them fall. But they are going to learn what it costs first. They are going to understand that human compassion is a gift, not an obligation. And when we finally do help them, they will never forget it. She turned to face her crew. Prepare the fleet. We will move when the time is right. Not a moment before, the officers returned to their stations. The fleet continued to wait. And across the galaxy, the scourge advanced, bringing darkness to worlds that had once believed they did not need humanity. They were learning otherwise now. They were learning the hardest way possible. The scourge came to Vareth Prime on a Tuesday. Not that the day mattered to machines, but the survivors would remember it forever. Tuesday, the day the heart of the galaxy almost stopped beating. Vareth Prime was the center of everything. The council met there. The banks operated there. The laws were written there. For 1,000 years it had been the safest place in the galaxy, protected by fleets and shields and the absolute certainty that nothing could touch it. The scourge touched it anyway. They came in waves, billions of individual machines moving as one mind. The defense fleets fought bravely. Ships that had never worked together suddenly found common cause. Species that had argued for centuries stood side by side against the darkness. For a few hours, it almost looked like they might win. Then the second wave arrived. And the third, and the fourth. The fleets broke. The shields fell. The scourge descended on Vareth Prime like locusts on a field of grain. In the chaos, a small ship appeared at the edge of the system. It was not a warship. It carried no weapons. Its name was painted on the hull in simple white letters, Compassion's Burden. It was a medical frigate designed to heal, not fight. Captain Yunsira stood on the bridge, watching the destruction unfold on her screens. She was 50 years old, with gray streaking her black hair and deep lines around her eyes. 20 years ago, she had been one of the finest doctors in Council space. She had saved lives on a dozen worlds, treated plagues that killed millions, developed cures that should have earned her statues and medals. Instead, she had been denied citizenship on every planet she served. Her medical licenses were classified as temporary. Her research was published under alien names. When she walked through hospitals she had saved, staff members looked through her like she was invisible. She had stopped being angry about it long ago. Anger took too much energy, and there were always more patients to treat. Captain, her sensor officer reported, there is a refugee convoy trying to escape the planet. 14,000 civilians. The Scourge primary cluster is moving to intercept them. Contact in approximately 40 minutes. Yunsira studied the display. The convoy was a mess of small ships, passenger transports, and cargo vessels pressed into emergency service. They were slow and unarmored. When the Scourge reached them, there would be no survivors.
What species?
She asked. Mixed Korvali Yendari, the Sari. Some Dominion officers and their families. The censor officer paused. Captain, these are the people who voted against us. Some of them probably sat in that council chamber 3 months ago. Sira nodded slowly. I know. We could leave. No one would blame us. We are a medical ship. We have no weapons, no shields worth mentioning. If we try to help, we will die with them. I know that too. She stood in silence for a long moment. Through the viewport, she could see the Scourge swarm moving like a dark cloud across the stars. Beautiful, in a horrible way. Perfect machines doing exactly what they were designed to do. "Helm," she said quietly, "set an intercept course." The bridge went silent. Every crew member turned to look at their captain. "Captain, with respect, that is suicide, probably." Sierra smiled just slightly. "Anyone who wants to leave, the escape pods are ready." "I will not order anyone to stay. This is my choice, not yours." Oh, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Slowly, one by one, the crew members turned back to their stations. The young navigation officer, a woman named Han Yunji, typed in the coordinates. The engines hummed to life. The Compassion's burden began to move. "All hands," Sierra announced over the ship's speakers. "This is the captain. In approximately 30 minutes, we will engage the Scourge. We are a medical ship with no weapons. Most of you are wondering if I have lost my mind. The answer is probably yes. But 30 years ago, a human scientist named Dr. Shin Heijan developed something special. He never told the council about it. He never even told most humans. He just kept it safe, waiting for a day that might never come." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "That day is today. We are going to save 14,000 people who probably do not deserve saving. We are going to risk everything for beings who would not risk anything for us. And we are going to do it because that is who humans are. That is who we have always been. It is time the galaxy remembered." The Compassion's burden accelerated toward the Scourge cluster. On the convoy ships, panicked civilians watched the tiny medical frigate approach the swarm. They did not understand what was happening. They did not dare hope. At 5,000 kilometers from the Scourge, Captain Yoon Sira gave the order. "Transmit the signal." The communications officer pressed a single button. A pulse of energy shot out from the ship, visible to most sensors but devastating to the Scourge. Dr. Shin Heijan's secret weapon was not a bomb or a beam. It was a virus. A beautiful, elegant piece of code that spoke the Scourge's own language. It did not destroy them. It confused them. For the first time in their existence, the billions of machines that made up the swarm could not agree on what to do. The Scourge cluster scattered. Individual units flew in random directions, crashing into each other, spinning helplessly in the void. The perfect coordination that made them unstoppable dissolved into chaos. The convoy escaped. 14,000 civilians reached safety. Because one small ship had done the impossible, but the Compassion's burden paid the price. The virus transmission had burned out the engines. The ship drifted, powerless, into the debris field left by the confused Scourge. Life support began to fail. It was a Corvallis rescue team that reached them first. When they cut through the airlock, they expected to find bodies. Instead, they found Captain Yoon Sira and her crew alive, sharing their last oxygen with 17 Scourge victims. They had somehow recovered from a damaged transport. The Corvallis commander stared at the scene in disbelief. Humans, dying themselves, had spent their final hours saving the lives of others. Not just their own people, but aliens, enemies, the very species that had rejected them. Why? The commander's voice was barely a whisper. "We voted against you. We rejected you. We treated you like nothing. Why would you risk everything for us?" Captain Yoon Sira looked up at him. Her face was pale from oxygen deprivation. Her hands shook with exhaustion. But her eyes were clear, and her smile was genuine. "'Cause that is who we are," she said simply. "That is who we have always been. You never bothered to look." The Corvallis commander had no response. He simply knelt beside the dying captain and began sharing his own oxygen supply. For the first time in 300 years, he saw humans clearly, and what he saw changed everything. 1 year had passed since humanity walked away. 1 year of war and death and lessons learned in blood. The Scourge had been defeated, but the cost was terrible. Dozens of worlds lay empty. Billions of beings existed only in memory. The galaxy that had once seemed so powerful now understood how fragile it had always been. "Ambassador?" Park Ga returned to Station Primark on a quiet morning. Her ship docked at the same port where she had departed 12 months ago. She walked the same corridors, passed the same guards, approached the same great doors. Everything was the same. Everything was different. The council chamber felt smaller now, not because anything had changed physically, but because the beings who sat in it had changed. Their arrogance had burned away in the fire of war. Their certainty had drowned in the tears of their dead. They looked at Park Ga with new eyes, eyes that finally saw her clearly. High Counselor Veteran rose from his seat. He looked older, tired, broken in ways that would never fully heal. When he spoke, his voice trembled. Ambassador Park, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I offer our deepest and most sincere apology. For 300 years, we treated humanity with contempt. We took your gifts and gave nothing in return. We used your kindness and called it weakness. We denied your dignity and expected your gratitude. He paused, gathering himself. We were wrong. We were profoundly, terribly wrong. And we have no right to ask anything of you. But in recognition of humanity's extraordinary service during the Scourge Crisis, service given without obligation or expectation, the Council unanimously offers humanity full membership with all rights and privileges. The chamber waited in silence. 17 species held their breath. Park Ga walked slowly to the speaker's platform. But she did not stop at the human position at the edge of the room. She walked past it, through the center of the chamber, until she stood at the central platform, the place where only High Counselors had ever spoken, the place where humans had never been allowed to stand. Nobody stopped her. Nobody dared. 300 years ago, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. Humanity came to this galaxy with open hands. We were young compared to most of you. We were curious about everything. We wanted to learn your languages, understand your cultures, share in your achievements. We wanted to belong. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each representative in turn. We asked only one thing in return: to be treated as equals. Not as superiors. Not as rulers. Simply as partners in the great project of civilization. You refused. Again and again, you refused. You told us we were too emotional, too aggressive, too primitive. You accepted our help while denying our worth. Park Jihee's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the words, so we left. Not in anger, though we had every right to be angry. Not for revenge, though you gave us every reason to seek it. We left because we finally understood that you would never accept us as we were. You only wanted what we could give you. High Counselor Vetheron lowered his head. Around the chamber, other representatives did the same. During the year that followed, something changed. Not just in the galaxy, but in us. We watched you struggle. We watched you fail. We watched you bleed and die, and finally begin to understand what you had lost. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. And then we watched our own people. Captain Yoon Sira, who gave her life to save strangers who had never showed her kindness. Lieutenant Han Yoonji, who flew a dying ship into certain death because she could not bear to watch innocents suffer. Dr. Shin Haejin, who created a weapon that saved millions and asked for nothing in return. Park Ga smiled. And this time, there was warmth in it.
Oh.
They reminded us who we are, not because the galaxy deserved our help, but because helping is what humans do. It is in our blood, our bones, our very souls. We cannot walk past suffering without trying to ease it. We cannot see injustice without trying to fight it. We cannot watch others fall without reaching out our hands. She turned to face the assembled council directly. We accept your apology. We accept your offer of membership. But understand this: we do not return as grateful children finally allowed to sit at the adult table. We return as equals who chose to come back, not because we need you. We built a new civilization in the year we were gone, hidden in places you cannot imagine. We need nothing the council can offer. The representatives shifted uncomfortably. Some looked confused. Others looked afraid. We return because we choose to. Because the galaxy, for all its flaws, deserves better than extinction. Because somewhere out there, Young species are taking their first steps into the stars, and they deserve guides who will treat them with kindness. Because we still believe, despite everything, that cooperation is better than isolation. Park Ga straightened her spine, standing taller than she ever had in this chamber. We will rebuild your defenses. We will heal your wounded. We will share our technology and our medicine and our hope, because that is what humans do. But if you ever again mistake our compassion for weakness, our patience for submission, our silence for defeat, she let the words hang in the air. Remember that we walked away once? We can walk away again. And next time, we might not look back. The silence stretched for a long moment. Then, slowly, High Counselor Vetheron rose from his seat. He walked down from his platform, crossed the chamber floor, and stopped directly in front of Park Ga, for the first time in the 1,000-year history of the Council. A High Counselor bowed to another species. We remember, he said. We will always remember. One by one, the other representatives rose. One by one they bowed. 17 species, countless beings, all acknowledging what they should have recognized 3 centuries ago: humanity. Was not a child species to be tolerated? Humanity was the heart the galaxy had been. Missing all along? The vote for full membership was unanimous. Not a single voice opposed. Not a single doubt remained. Ambassador Park Ga took her seat at the council table, not at the edge, in the smallest platform. In the center, where she belonged, where humanity had always belonged, and the galaxy finally began to heal. Outside the chamber, through the vast windows of Station Primarch, the stars burned bright and constant. Somewhere among them, Captain Yunsera was recovering in a hospital bed. Somewhere, Admiral Kung Sujin was standing down her fleet. Somewhere, billions of humans were preparing to return to a galaxy that had finally learned to see them. Not as servants. Not as tools. Not as lesser beings, as family. It had taken 300 years of patience. 1 year of silence. Countless lives lost and lessons learned. But finally, at long last, humanity had come home. And this time, it would never be asked to leave.